Every backyard has one. A raised mound of loose dirt sitting near the patio, the mailbox post, or right along the edge of the driveway where the kids ride their bikes. You step outside one morning with your coffee, and there it is again, bigger than yesterday. You dump a can of ant killer on it, watch the powder disappear into the cracks, and feel pretty good about yourself for about 6 hours. Then you walk past that same spot the next afternoon and the mound is back, rebuilt, taller than before, like the ants read the label on your can and laughed. What you just did was spray the porch. The house is still standing somewhere underground, and the queen inside it never even knew you were there. This is Earl Dawson's yard, and if you have ever stood over an anthill with a spray can wondering why nothing seems to work for more than a few days, stick around. I'm going to walk you through why store sprays fail so often and the cheap trick that actually goes after the part of the colony you can't see. I've lived on this same 5 acres for going on 30 years now, and I've fought more ant hills than I can count. Fire ants along the fence line one summer, big black carpenter ants working their way into the porch posts another. My daddy used to say an ant hill is like an iceberg. What's poking up out of the grass is nothing compared to what's underneath. And he was right, because a mature colony can run 6 or 7 feet down into the soil, with tunnels branching off in every direction, and a queen sitting somewhere in the middle of all that laying a couple hundred eggs a day. You spray the mound, you kill the ants standing on top of it when the can went off, and that's about it. The rest of the colony just digs a new exit somewhere else in the yard and keeps right on going. I'm not an entomologist. I never took a class on insects in my life. What I am is a guy who got tired of buying the same can of spray every few weeks and decided to figure out why it wasn't working. Turns out the pest control industry knows exactly why it doesn't work. A spray that kills on contact is a product you buy again next month. A treatment that actually wipes out the colony is a product you buy once. I'll let you sit with that for a second, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Before we get into what actually works, let's talk about why the mound itself is misleading you. When ants build a hill, they're not building a house. They're building an air vent. The real structure, the nursery chambers, the food storage, the queen's chamber, all of that sits well below the mound itself, sometimes at an angle off to the side of it. So when you pour boiling water straight down the middle of the hole, or dump granules right on the pile, you're treating the chimney and hoping it reaches the basement. Sometimes it does. Most of the time it doesn't, especially with an established colony that's had a year or two to dig deep. There's also the fact that most ant colonies aren't loners. Depending on the species, you might have satellite colonies scattered across your property, all connected underground, or all sending workers back and forth to trade food and pheromone signals. Kill the one mound you can see, and 3 more that were never visible to begin with. Keep the whole operation running. That's the piece nobody tells you when you're standing in the aisle at the hardware store, looking at 40 different bug spray brands. So here's how I handle it now, in 3 layers, starting from the ground up. Method 1. The borax and sugar bait that ants carry home themselves. This is the one that actually gets down into the colony, because instead of you trying to dig your way to the queen, you get the ants to do the digging for you. Worker ants forage. That's their whole job. They go out, find food, and carry it back to feed the colony, including the queen and the larvae that never leave the nest. If you can get them to carry poison back with them, thinking it's food, the colony takes care of the rest. The recipe is about as simple as it gets. You need 3 tablespoons of white sugar, 1 tablespoon of borax, and 1 cup of warm water. Stir it until the sugar and borax are fully dissolved, because if you leave grit floating in there, the ants won't take to it as well. Once it's mixed, soak some cotton balls in the liquid, or dip strips of cardboard, and set them out near the trails where you actually see ants moving. Not the hill itself, the trail. That thin little highway of ants, marching in a line along the edge of the sidewalk or up the side of the porch post, is worth more to you than the hill, because that's the route carrying food back to the nest. Now, borax works slow, and that's on purpose. If it killed on contact, the first ant to touch it would die right there, and the rest of the colony would never bring it home. Because it takes a day or two to work, the workers have time to carry it all the way back, share it with other workers, through a process called trophallaxis, which is just a fancy word for mouth-to-mouth food sharing, and eventually it reaches the larvae and the queen. That's the part a spray can never do. You are not fighting the ants you can see. You are letting the ants you can see defeat the ants you can't. A couple things to know before you set this out. Borax is toxic to dogs and cats if they eat a meaningful amount of it, so place your bait stations somewhere pets and kids can't get into. Under an overturned flower pot with a small opening cut in the side works well, or tucked into a section of PVC pipe. Refresh the bait every few days since it dries out and stops attracting ants once it crystallizes, and don't expect results overnight. This usually takes 1 to 2 weeks to fully knock down a colony, sometimes longer for a big established one. I know that's not what you want to hear when there's an ant crawling up your arm right now, but the slow ones are the ones that work. If sugar ants seem uninterested in the bait, some colonies actually prefer protein over sugar depending on the season, especially in spring when they're feeding larvae. Swap the sugar for a spoonful of peanut butter mixed with a little borax and set both versions out at once to see which one they're hauling back faster. Watch for a day or two and let the ants tell you what they want. Method 2. Diatomaceous earth for the trails and entry points. While the bait is working underground, you need something for the ants that are already inside, or the ones marching along your foundation, your windowsills, or up into the kitchen. This is where diatomaceous earth comes in, the same stuff gardeners and grain farmers have used for decades. Look for food grade on the bag, not the pool filter kind, because pool grade diatomaceous earth is processed differently and isn't meant to be sprinkled around your house or your pets. The way it works is mechanical, not chemical. Under a microscope, the powder is made of tiny fossilized shells with sharp edges. When an ant crawls through it, those edges scratch through the waxy outer layer of its exoskeleton, and that waxy layer is what keeps moisture inside the ant's body. Once it's damaged, the ant dries out and dies within a day or two. No poison, no spray, just a dry, dusty barrier that does its job through friction. I keep a small handheld duster loaded with it and go around the baseboards where ants have been getting in, the door thresholds, and any cracks in the foundation I can find. Outside, I put a light dusting around the base of the house, along fence posts, and around any hill I still see active, though at this point I'm doing it more to slow down the workers than expecting it to solve the whole colony. A thin layer works better than a thick one. If you pile it on too heavy, ants will sometimes just walk around it instead of through it, and wet powder is useless, so don't put it out right before rain. One thing worth mentioning, this stuff is not selective. It'll dry out any small insect that walks through it, and if you inhale a big cloud of it while applying, it can irritate your lungs, so wear a mask when you're dusting a large area and try to do it on a calm day without much wind. Keep it away from ponds too, since it can settle in the water and bother anything living in there. I've compiled all these traditional methods into a manual. The link is in the description. Method 3. The vinegar wash for the counters and the walk paths. Bait and powder handle the colony and the entry points, but there's a third piece a lot of folks skip, and that's breaking the scent trail ants use to communicate. Ants lay down a pheromone trail as they walk, invisible to us, but it's basically a set of directions the rest of the colony follows. Kill the ants on your counter and the trail is still there, so more ants show up an hour later, following the same scent path like nothing happened. Mix equal parts white vinegar and water in a spray bottle, and wipe down the areas where you've seen trails, kitchen counters, windowsills, door frames, the edge of the patio. The vinegar smell breaks down the pheromone trail, So new ants coming along that path get confused and turn back instead of following the crowd straight to your sugar bowl. It won't kill the colony, and it fades within a few hours, so you'll want to reapply it for a few days while the other two methods work underground. Some folks like adding a few drops of peppermint oil to the mix, since ants seem to avoid the smell, though I'll be honest, the vinegar alone has done the job for me most of the time. A word of caution on the vinegar. It'll strip the shine off natural stone counters and some wood finishes if you use it full strength or leave it sitting too long, so wipe it off with plain water after a few minutes on anything you're not sure about, and test a small hidden spot first. Now let's talk about the hill itself, because I know some of you are staring at one right now, wanting to do something about it today. If you want to physically disrupt an active mound while the bait is doing its slower work, pour a mix of boiling water down into the entrance, several gallons if you can manage it, ideally in the early morning while the colony is closer to the surface. This kills a portion of the colony on contact, but understand it is not a complete fix on its own, especially for anything with tunnels running deep or set off at an angle from the main hole. Think of it as thinning the herd while the bait handles the queen. Something people ask me all the time is whether they should just dig the hill up instead. I've tried it. Unless you're prepared to dig down several feet and you know exactly where the colony branches off to, you'll mostly just make the ants angry and scatter them into a wider area of your yard, sometimes into your house looking for a new place to settle. I don't recommend it unless the hill is small and freshly started, and even then, be ready to deal with a very upset colony for a day or two afterward. There's also the question of which method to use where. Fire ant mounds respond well to the boiling water and bait combination, since they tend to build one or two dominant mounds you can actually find and target. Carpenter ants, the big black ones that hollow out wood, respond better to bait stations placed directly along their trails, since they're often nesting inside a wall or a porch post rather than a mound in the yard, and diatomaceous earth around entry points does a lot of the heavy lifting there. Sugar ants, the tiny ones that show up on the kitchen counter in summer, are usually the easiest of the bunch and respond fast to the borax bait since they're constantly foraging for sweets. Pavement ants, the small dark ones building little piles of sand between the sidewalk cracks, are nearly identical to sugar ants in how they respond, so the same bait works fine there too. I want to be straight with you about something. None of these three methods work instantly, and if you're hoping for a magic fix that clears your whole yard by tomorrow morning, you're going to be disappointed no matter what you buy or make. What these methods do is address the actual structure of the problem, instead of just the part sticking up out of your lawn. A can of spray gives you a satisfying 15 seconds of watching ants die on the surface. A proper bait system gives you a yard that stays clear for months, because you went after the part of the colony doing the reproducing. And I'll say this plainly, because I think it needs saying. The pest control industry isn't hiding some secret ingredient from you. Borax has been sitting on hardware store shelves for over 100 years. What they're not eager to advertise is how well it works when you use it right, because a customer who solves their own ant problem for the cost of a bag of sugar and a box of borax is a customer who doesn't call for a monthly treatment plan. A recurring service gets paid every month whether the ants are gone or not. A homemade bait station that actually works gets used once and put away in the garage. Let me answer a few questions I get asked a lot, because I think they'll save you some trouble. Does the bait work on every kind of ant? Mostly, though a handful of species, mainly certain fire ant varieties in the deep south, can be more particular about what they'll carry back to the colony. If you set bait out for 3 or 4 days and see zero activity on it, try switching from sugar to a protein source like peanut butter or a bit of grease, since some colonies shift their diet depending on the season and what they're already feeding the larvae. How close to the hill should the bait go? Not on the hill itself. Ants avoid disturbed dirt right around a damaged or recently sprayed mound, So set your bait along the actual trail a few feet off from the hill, somewhere they're already walking through on their normal route. Is it safe around vegetable gardens? Diatomaceous earth is fine near food crops. Food grade is literally rated for that use. But keep borax bait stations away from anything you're going to harvest and eat, and always keep them covered so curious hands or paws can't get into them. What if the hill comes back in a different spot? That's actually a decent sign, believe it or not. It often means the original colony took real damage and had to relocate or rebuild, rather than sitting there unaffected. Keep an eye on the new spot, set fresh bait along its trail, and treat it the same way. A colony that's constantly on the move is a colony that's losing the fight, not winning it. Do I need to do all three methods every time? Depends on the size of the problem. A single small mound near the mailbox might only need the bait and a boiling water treatment. A yard with 3 or 4 active colonies and ants getting into the house is going to need the full layered approach. Bait for the colonies, powder for the entry points, vinegar for the trails already inside. If your yard has been fighting the same anthill for 2 summers running no matter how many cans you've gone through, that tells you something. It tells you the colony survived every single treatment because the treatment never reached where the colony actually lives. Try the layered approach instead. Bait stations near the trails, a light dusting of diatomaceous earth around entry points and foundations, vinegar wiped along the counters and walkways while it all takes effect. Give it 2 weeks before you judge whether it worked, because underground colonies don't collapse overnight. They starve out slowly once the food source turns against them. My granddad kept a jar of borax and a sack of sugar in the shed for this exact purpose, long before anybody was calling it a hack or a trick online. He just called it dealing with the ants. There wasn't a name for it. It was just something you did every few years when a mound got too close to the porch steps, and it worked well enough that a whole generation never had to think twice about it. If you've dealt with a stubborn hill on your property and found something that worked better than what I've laid out here, put it in the comments. I read every one of them, and half the tricks I use now came from somebody down in the comments section telling me what worked on their place. If this saved you a trip to the store for another can of spray that isn't going to fix the real problem, go ahead and subscribe. I've got more of this coming, and there's a lot of ground left to cover before the season's out.